Good morning. You're watching The Morning Show here on Arise News. I'm Ruben Abati.
And I am Adesoa Omorwan. Well, we've got a great show lined up for you over the next 3 hours. So sit back, relax, and let's kickstart your day because The Morning Show begins right now.
Welcome to this special edition of the program, which will feature a conversation on the Edo State governorship election. Our esteemed guest will be Governor Godwin Obaseki, who is running for a second time in office on the platform of the People's Democratic Party, and his main rival, Osagie Ize-Iyamu of the All Progressives Congress. This will be the second time that these two men will be crossing paths in the last 4 years, with the incumbent running on the platform of the All Progressives Congress in 2016, while in a reversal of roles, Mr. Ize-Iyamu contested the election as the PDP candidate. It is important here to emphasize that this is not a debate, but a conversation on Edo State, which is expected to provide these two major candidates the opportunity of laying out their vision for governance in the state. Both of them now have less than 72 hours to do just that before the first ballot is cast on Saturday, September the 19th. The first hour of the conversation will focus on the economy, jobs creation, and security, while the second hour will be on education, healthcare, and socio-political issues. Equally important is the fact that Governor Obaseki will have an opportunity to speak about his vision as captured in his Make Edo Great Again document, while Pastor Ize-Iyamu will be focusing on a simple agenda. Welcome back to The Morning Show here on Arise News. Without much ado, let's get this very important conversation off the ground. And with us right here is the governorship candidate of the All Progressives Congress for this weekend's election, pastor, politician, former chief of staff, and secretary to the Edo State government, Pastor Osagie Ize-Iyamu. Governor Obaseki, who is the People's Democratic Party's candidate, is also part of this conversation. Let's go to the questions. Good morning. Pastor Ize-Iyamu, thank you for joining us on this special edition of The Morning Show and the conversation around the forthcoming election on Saturday. Well, Pastor, let's start with you.
Thank you.
In your manifesto, you unfolded the SMILE agenda with a focus on security, manpower, development, infrastructure, public-private partnerships, leadership, and employment. How do you intend to deliver on this agenda?
Well, thank you, Dr. Abati, for this invitation. I have a comprehensive document on how I believe we can reverse the fortunes of our state and make it better. I believe sincerely that without good security, we will not be able to position our state the way we want it to be. Investors will not come, tourists will not come, and even our own indigents abroad will be reluctant to come back home if we continue to suffer the level of insecurity that we have. In the same way, without serious infrastructure, it's going to be very difficult to attract any serious industry or business to our state. And then, of course, our people too must be trained and retrained to make them have the necessary skills to compete at any level. So the agenda has been well thought out. And, in terms of implementation, of course, we will be looking at funds. The state is blessed. I just believe that our monies have not been prudently utilized in the past. So this time we intend to set up an economic management team that would ensure that the monies of the state are well utilized. In terms of immediate implementation, it depends on what we have in the coffers of the state. If our state is not in the red, then there are so many things we can jumpstart and begin to do. If, however, we find out that our state is in the red, there's nothing wrong in assessing the capital market to see how we can get some short-term facility to be able to kickstart what we want to do. But we sincerely believe that by the time we begin to implement our programs, the fortunes of our state will change. By the time people see our sincerity, they see our focus and our priorities, we also believe that so many donor agencies and so many people will be willing to come to our aid and to assist our state. So we are not too much afraid about how well we implement our projects. We just want to win first, get in, and then you will see serious implementation of the agenda we have set for ourselves.
Thank you very much, Pastor Ize-Iyamu. And this is just to inform our viewers that all is set for both candidates to join us. And we are expecting the candidate of the People's Democratic Party, the incumbent governor of Edo State, Governor Godwin Obaseki, to join this conversation. We are hoping that he will join us any moment from now. Back to you, Pastor Ize-Iyamu. One of the agendas you have to tackle is unemployment in Edo State. According to the latest statistics from the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics, in Q2, that's Q2 for the year, the unemployment rate in Edo State currently stands at 19%, while underemployment rate was put at 34.9%. What is your plan to create an enabling environment for industrialization and SMEs to triumph in the state?
Well, thank you. I haven't believed that the statistics are worse. The statistics you have right now is based on the data that was received, and mainly from the Edo State government. But I've told people in other fora that most of those statistics are wrong. The bogus claim that 151,000 jobs have been created is not true. So the unemployment rate is a lot higher. To be able to reverse the trend, we believe that with a simple agenda, a lot of things will change. For example, by the time we make our state more secured, a lot of businesses are going to come. The existing ones are going to expand and increase their scope, and that would help a lot in creating more jobs. The security aspect of our simple agenda is also intended to get many of our young ones employed. We intend to do community policing, whereby we would identify the local vigilante groups all over the state, reorganize them, make them more functional, and ensure that on a monthly basis we pay them some stipend. They cannot be keeping our state safe and complementing the police, and we just ignore them and pretend they don't exist. We can no longer leave the burden of looking after them to the communities who have become impoverished by even government activities. So the security side is going to create jobs. Infrastructure, we also intend to invest a lot of money on infrastructure, and our policy will be geared towards empowering our local people. That means we intend to put more money in the system that will benefit local businesses, ensure that whatever we are doing, they get involved, which means our local businesses will now see the need to even employ more people within the system. So in terms of infrastructure, we believe that that itself could also create jobs. And then manpower development. By the time we teach our people relevant skills, they might not even need to look for government jobs. They'll be able to be self-employed. The skill acquisition centers in the state, we intend to re-equip them and make them more functional so that we can train our people in different areas of skills and ensure that we also support them to be able to do businesses. Agriculture is one big area that we believe that if we do proper investment and support our people, so many thousands would actually be employed. Of course, you know that we are quite strong in so many crops. So by the time we begin to actually support these farmers with cash incentive, crop incentive, technical incentive, many people will be inclined to come into agriculture. Another thing that has been a big problem is the state of our rural areas. So we intend to deliberately improve on those places, create the necessities of life, ensure that those rural areas are accessible. So do the roads to take them there, make sure that we have electricity, ensure that there's water, put schools and put hospitals. By the time you do that, you would even find an urban to rural drift. People moving to the rural areas where they can farm. And of course, in all those farms, we are going to also look at the possibility of creating agro-industries. So it's going to be a full chain, and the real beneficiaries will be our people. So in every area that we are going to be working on, we are going to be intending to create jobs. And of course, the last thing in the simple agenda is employment. For example, we don't have teachers in our state. We intend to massively invest in teachers. We intend to employ them because you can't have any functional education without teachers. In the same case, the healthcare facilities don't have doctors, they don't have nurses. So we lack healthcare personnel. Again, we intend to employ many of them. So in many areas, we just believe that, we cannot, in trying to keep the personnel cost low in our state, will now deprive our people of fundamental services. So areas where we need to employ, we are going to employ. And by the time we engage the private sector in serious businesses, we think that they on their own too will bring in so many jobs. So we're optimistic that in the next 4 years, a lot of jobs will come into our state and our youth will be gainfully employed.
Well, it's good, Pastor Ize-Iyamu, that you already mentioned agriculture. And agriculture is one area in which Edo State has a comparative advantage, particularly in the area of food production, rubber, and oil palm plantations. Now, you've talked about a number of things you will do. Could you tell us in specific terms how you intend to explore that value chain in the agriculture sector and what you will prioritize? Is it palm? Is it rubber? And in which specific parts of the state? But we'll take a short break, I guess, at this point. And when we return, Pastor Ize-Iyamu, you have the opportunity to talk further on agriculture. Welcome back to the morning show here on the Arise News channel. You are still watching the special edition of this program focusing on the Edo governorship election, and we're having a conversation with the two main candidates of the leading political parties, Governor Godwin Obaseki and the candidate of the All Progressives Congress, Pastor Ize-Iyamu. We're still hoping that Governor Obaseki will join us in the course of this conversation. You can see we've been running adverts provided by his campaign organization, and the Arise crew is right there in Benin at his residence. We're hoping that you will join us. But back to you, Pastor Ize-Iyamu. I'd asked you a question about the need to be more specific in terms of what you intend to do within the agricultural value chain in Edo State. Just for you to be more specific in terms of priorities and processes.
Yeah, thank you very much. We intend to leverage on what we have, which unfortunately we've not really taken advantage of. For example, our people are quite strong in rice cultivation. The Ekpoma axis in Edo Central, the Ilushi axis in Esan Southeast, the Anegbete axis in Esako Central, in Edo North, are areas where it's very suitable for rice production. And all these things influenced Leventis many years ago to set up the rice farm in Agenebude. So we intend to resuscitate these schemes and ensure that we make the best of it. Now that government has more or less placed a ban on imported rice, we have the opportunity to make our rice farmers to flourish. Unfortunately, while other state governments have been able to access funds for their farmers in this area, Kebbi, Ebonyi, etc., we have not been able to do so. So we need to be able to get funds for our local farmers, give them the technical support that they need, provide the equipment that they cannot procure, and begin to cultivate rice massively because our people consume rice on a daily basis. Another area where we will look at is in terms of oil palm production, which in the past was a very big issue here. But thank God again, we still have major companies here. You have Presco, you have Okomo, and the rest of them. But I know too that only recently the state government was able to get from the CBN 69 billion for an oil palm initiative, a program to expand the scope of oil palm production. Unfortunately, the lack of transparency in government has not made it possible for us to even assess who are the beneficiaries of this huge loan from the CBA. That, if were utilized, would have, increased the scope of oil palm production and, of course, brought in a lot of revenue. Again, we were very strong in rubber, and the Urunigbe rubber estate, which is in my local government, government has, government has given it to a company. I heard Michelin, I'm not sure. Again, because of lack of transparency, many of these things that ought to be disclosed so that people can have input in it are very difficult to even find out. But rubber is one area where we can still do well. The prices are not doing badly. Cocoa is also another area in the on axis, cocoa, cashew, that are quite good. Then cassavita, cassava. Cassava is very strong in the central and in the Edo South. In fact, when I was secretary to government, we deliberately established a cassavita factory at Uromi. We got EBS from Brazil to help us with the equipment and installation. And it was done. Even the generators were bought. But surprisingly, that place has not been opened. Meanwhile, all the equipments had practically been bought. The generators were there. And all that was needed was just a take-off grant. I don't know the state of those equipments now because they've not functioned for over 4 years. But it's one factory that I would love to see opened so that we can make maximum use of it. And then, of course, we need to also try and see how we can bring agro-based industries because of the availability of raw materials. We need to see how we can bring them into our state and get them to support our economy, and we intend to do so. I've also mentioned that the Ewu flour mill was one major industry that we had in Edo Central. I understand that, it's been privatized, it's been sold, but we need to also take steps to appeal to the new owners to get the place working. I remember we had that same situation with the Okbila Smith that was dormant for many years, but we were able to get the new owners, Boa Smith, to work on it and activate it, and today the place is functional. So there are huge opportunities in the agricultural sector. If you go to in Nwode, that's like a fruit bet. Everybody comes from the north and north to come and collect fruit. So we need to actually set up agricultural clusters, to make maximum use of the fruits that we have. Set up grain clusters, So the potential is huge, but it's important that we are able to assess these local farmers and then encourage commercial farming. But the local farmers, they have their own limitations. They lack funds. They cannot access the capital market or serious funding. And government must play the role of facilitator. Government must be their guarantor to be able to ensure that they get these loans. But what we have been hearing is that these farmers, their names are collected. They are assured that they will get assistance. And at the end of the day, money is collected on their behalf. Is diverted. And the farm projects that the government has embarked upon have actually flopped. They were not well thought out, and they did not bring in the required people to handle it. For example, the Sobe farm, which I mentioned in our channel's debate, government wasted close to 2 billion on that project, and it came to naught. Actually, it should have been something that would have been turning around itself. By the time the profit comes, you apply it back in, and then you continue to increase it, and it brings prosperity. But if you go to Sobe, everybody will tell you that the project is a joke and it has failed. And that's 2 billion down the drain. The same way they also tried to do the rice project in Agenebude with over 5 billion. It also failed. So I think that government should ask themselves, why are these projects failing? And my take is that they are not consulting the required experts to handle this project. That will not do any project without bringing in professionals. I know my limitations. But if you have professionals guiding you, then things will work. And honestly speaking, I don't even need to look outside for professionals. Our state is blessed with enough manpower. We have so many universities who can act as resource centers, to what we want to do. So all we need to do is to cash in on their availability and use them for consultancy. And we'll find out that many of these projects, because they are from here and they are passionate about development and progress of their state, they'll be able to do this at less cost and they'll be more committed. So let me assure you that we intend to invest a lot in agriculture. We're going to look at the strength of every local government. Our dream is that every local government of the state must be able to be, a place where that is renowned for something. It's not just enough to say that you collect allocation. What do you produce? What do you bring in? So we're going to ensure that every local government is challenged to be able to produce something, and we're going to give them all the support.
Thank you for that. Let's step away from agriculture for a bit and talk about revenue. As we know, COVID-19 has brought a drought in revenue, and the finance minister continues to project and warn of tumbling in FAC allocations to state. And let's look at some of the numbers, Pastor Ize-Iyamu. In 2017, Edo State's IGR was 25.34 billion naira. In 2018, it was 28.43 billion naira. And just last year, it was 29.4 billion naira. Now, with the COVID-19 realities that I have mentioned and the warnings from the federal government that states can no longer depend on allocation from the federal, how do you intend to boost the IGR of Edo State and reduce that dependence on Abuja?
Thank you. You see, the statistics you just gave paint a picture that we have not really made any progress in terms of driving our economy. Figures don't lie. If, as the governor was claiming, that a lot of strides have been made in economic factor, you will see the numbers. It will reflect on the IGRO. There will be massive upward move. But basically, you just see what you see is a stagnation. The thing is not moving forward because government is concentrating only on the traditional areas of revenue. One, money from the federation account. And then number two, those who normally pay taxes. How many new people have they brought into the tax net? How many people? So the reality is that when this government came in, they had so much resources. You had over 20 billion bailout funds. You had the Paris Club refund. You had $75 million for C4 projects. So there was a lot of money. Now, those monies, if they were well spent, Edo State would have been able to cushion the effect of COVID. And what do I mean? If the monies I mentioned, for example, that were spent on the agricultural sector actually worked, because clearly those projects failed. If they had worked, by now we'll be talking about the new returns we are getting from our agricultural ventures, but they failed. So there's no doubt that we are in this problem because we failed to plan for the rainy day. It's important that the economy must be diversified. We can no longer continue like this, where every month all our hope is what comes in from the federation account. If we diversify our economy, the only unfortunate thing is that it's not something that can just be done in 1 year or even 2 years. But we can start. And there are some projects that can also bring short-term returns. We need to diversify our economy. We need to look at projects that will bring in revenue to our state and begin to see how we can push it. If I were to ask, in the past 4 years, where are the new projects that brought revenue to Edo State? None. None. The so-called industrial park that was started with fanfare, nothing happened to it. So there's no doubt that we need to diversify our economy. We need to make it stronger. And by the time we implement the simple agenda, you are also going to find out that our taxes will actually improve. Security will bring more businesses, more investments. Infrastructure will bring increase in businesses. So some of these things that we're talking about, and of course, when we even employ people, we're also increasing the IGR being paid. So we intend to stimulate the economy. Public-private partnership will drive the process, and you will see more people coming in, which means that the level of economic activity in our state will increase. More people will be employed. More businessmen will come. So on the taxation side, we're going to have increase in corporate taxes. We also have increase in pay. So I believe that with the simple agenda that we're going to put in place, our IGR will go up. It might not in the first 1 year or 2 years, because at that time we'll be talking about tax breaks, we'll be talking about incentives, we'll be talking about financial support. But if we find out that the situation is so bad, and because of that we cannot take off the way we want to take off, like I said, we can access the capital market, we can get funds to at least jumpstart some, because there are some things that cannot wait. The issue of infrastructure, the issue of security, the issue of the state of our educational system as of today, the lack of teachers, the lack of medical personnel, these things cannot wait. So if we have to borrow money to get this thing started, we will do so, knowing that, in the short run, not even long run, in the short run, we'll be able to turn our situation around, and then we'll begin to get value for money for the investments that we have put in place.
Well, Pastor Osagie Ize-Iyamu will take another short break at this point, and when we return, the conversation will continue. Hopefully by then, Governor Obaseki will have joined us. We'll be right back. Stay tuned. Welcome back to this special edition of the morning show titled Edo Governorship Election 2020, The Conversation. That conversation is between the incumbent governor, Godwin Obaseki, and the main challenger, Pastor Osagie Ize-Iyamu. In the last 30-something minutes, we've been with Pastor Osagie Ize-Iyamu, who has been taking questions from us. We're still hoping that Governor Obaseki will join us. Thank you very much, Pastor Osagie Ize-Iyamu, for staying with us and for being part of this conversation. So I'd like to take another question, which is a follow-up to the earlier one that you took before we went on break. COVID-19 pandemic and the drop in the price of crude oil has led to a sharp reduction in monthly allocation to states by the federal government. But the major problem is that the country and also the states, they face crisis in terms of domestic debt and foreign debt. Now, what's your plan to address this debt challenge, manage the debt, particularly in Edo State, and how do you intend to implement the SMILE agenda without necessarily putting Edo State into so much indebtedness?
Well, thank you. The first thing is that we need to set up an economic management team. The fact that I'm governor does not mean that I have all the answers. So we need to avail ourselves of the pool of economic experts that we have in our state and use them to deal with some of these problems. There's no doubt that our domestic and even external debt is quite huge. When you look at the South-South, it's the highest. And when you look at our revenue, it's actually one of the lowest. So it's a contradiction that we have incurred so much debt. And basically, there is nothing to show for it. So we need to see how we can manage these debts. Our experts are going to sit with us so that we'll be able to see how these debts can be managed. We are not going to run away from them. That would be irresponsible. But at the same time, these banks must know that we have priorities and our people have needs. And so they must understand that there must be a balance between loan repayment and being able to provide the things that our people need. So we intend to strike that balance. Where possible too, we intend to make a case for debt forgiveness, because we need to make them know that many of these so-called monies were not even properly utilized. And I also believe that it's also the duty of these financial institutions, apart from just lending us money, to also oversee and see how some of these monies are used. It's irresponsible to just give money and you're not even concerned about what these projects are used for. And in the event that we even need to borrow money, we need to get our priorities right. I will be very reluctant to borrow money for projects that cannot sustain itself. That's why I think that it's important that we begin to look at projects that will bring funds to our state. We have to look at it. A lot of the projects that have been done, unfortunately, have failed. If all these projects had worked, then perhaps we would have been able to say, okay, from what we are now getting, the investments were worth it. Peter Obi, when he was governor in Anambra, was able to set up some serious industries, including the beauty that he did. And the proceeds from there has kept the IGRO of that state extremely high. So that is the kind of thing we'll be looking at. So we're going to study the situation. I am hoping that when we come in, it will not be a very bleak situation. I remember when I was governor and we were going to leave office, we deliberately made an effort in 2007 to ensure that all the loans that we took were paid off. So as we were getting to the end of the tenure, we began to slow down and focus on loan repayment, so that when Osunbo came in as governor, even though the court later declared that it was illegally declared, but when he came in, he was able to kickstart and started doing roads and all that kind of projects because there was money and the state was not owing. That is how a responsible government should be. But in any event, we have not been elected to lament about the past. So we intend to take things in their stride. We'll look at the situation. Those that we can manage, we'll manage. Those that we cannot manage, we'll create alternatives. So we are very optimistic, and we believe that we have the will, which is very important. We have the will to be able to do the right thing for our state. And no matter the devastating effect of COVID, we are determined that our state must progress. And we also leverage on our people who are well positioned in diaspora. Many of them are very eager to support our state. We're even thinking about the diaspora fund, whereby we can put their resources to certain identified projects in our state that will turn the fortunes of our state around. And of course, they too will be shareholders in such projects. That is one of the things we have in the pipeline. We believe that by the time they see our sincerity, see the enhanced security, see the enhanced infrastructure, and what we are doing, a lot of them will be willing to also reach out to donor agencies to see how they can support us.
Interesting. Pastor Osagie Ize-Iyamu, with COVID-19, we are now learning the hard way, and we see the difference in countries that have invested heavily in technology are faring better. Now, you have spoken recently on harnessing technology to drive a lot of your programs. Could we get more specifics on how and in what areas technology would be used to improve governance and drive growth and development in the state? Are you looking at automating the jobs you want to provide? What exactly is technology coming to do here?
Well, technology is going to play a huge role. Take, for example, education. The lesson from COVID is that the usual gathering in classrooms might no longer be feasible in future. So the focus now will be on e-learning, digital education. So clearly, in the area of education, we need to revolutionize the process and change from traditional way of doing things to the reality that is on ground. Even in security, we intend to use technology to deal with the crimes that we have. We can employ drones, to oversee a lot of our localities and see where kidnappers and, criminals are hiding. We can purchase trackers that can identify, the locations of kidnappers anytime they make calls. So these are areas where technology can come in. And of course, in the area of farming, we must move from the communal way of doing farming to a more mechanized system. And of course, local people cannot afford such technology. So government must provide, industrial parks and clusters where these equipments can be located and used. So even in the areas of, like for example, because of the availability of wood, we're actually looking at a furniture making enterprise that will be located between Ikpobaoka and Ego. And in such places, we invite local furniture makers to participate in the scheme and bring all the equipments that will be needed to make their finished work as good as what comes from outside. Because what they lack is not the skill, it's just the equipment to be able to reach the quality that we see outside and that we desire. So we're going to provide this kind of equipment, we're going to provide this kind of technology. So in every area, we're going to look at it, whether it's agriculture, whether it's security, whether it's education, even medical. We're going to look at our hospitals. I thank Comrade Oshomole for the equipment he provided at the five-star hospital, which Osagie has now renamed as Edo Specialist Hospital. A lot of equipments are there, but unfortunately, it has more or less been privatized because it's not being managed by a private consultant, and the fees he's charging is so high that the average Edo man cannot access it. That is unfortunate, you know. But our people should have access to quality medical care, equipment that will be able to do diagnosis a lot easier. The old hospital now, where poor people are subjected to go because they don't have money for admission, do not even have X-ray machine. The one that was the building where X-ray machine was before is part of what was destroyed to create way for the new one. So as that today, you want to do X-ray in the old wing of the hospital, which was built in 1903, you have to go outside. That's loss of revenue, and of course you are delaying the attention that a sick patient requires. But all these things would address. So technology is going to play a huge role, and we also want to make our state a technology hub. Many years ago, University of Benin was one of the first to begin to offer courses in computer science. We had a huge computer center in the University of Benin that was doing so much. MPDC, they have a data center, you know, in Benin. So in terms of creating a Silicon Valley, a place where businesses can come and look for solutions to complex industrial problems, Edo can play that role. We have a lot of universities that can bring in consultants and experts in various fields. All we need to do is leverage on it. Some years ago, I talked about the potential in Benin Technical College, which was built with the effort of the Canadian government during Ogbemudia's government. Unfortunately, the place was abandoned, the dream was abandoned, and the present governor has talked about reopening it. We've seen adverts about what they have done to rebuild it, but the unfortunate thing is that he's taking close to 4 years to get the place started. That to me is a bit ridiculous, because anything we are doing, we must have a timeline. We must realize that even our tenure is time-bound. So I don't see why we will spend over 4 years trying to refurbish or renovate or re-equip an existing institution. If that had been done, that could have been, you know, a center for building manpower development and creating technical skills. Again, some have actually been built. Professor Nyobere, who is the House of Rep member from Onwa Federal Constituency, built a skill acquisition center to Zeba, you know, in his Onwa West local government. Unfortunately, all that was required was for government to provide support and open it. That has not been done. That would have also provided a lot of, you know, artisans and provided labor. And of course, we also be an athlete to provide, to teach technical skills that would have helped our people. But these things are not being done. But like I said, our job is not to lament. Our job is to look forward. We can't run away from technology. Technology will certainly help bring the ease of doing business better. Even in revenue generation, we intend to use them. In government policies, we intend to use them. So I can assure you that we are going to deploy technology and its advancement to see how we can improve on the way we do business in Edo State.
That note, Pastor Ize-Iyamu, we'll take another short break. When we return, the conversation will continue. Please stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Morning Show here on Arise News. It's still the special edition of the Morning Show, Edo Governorship Election 2020, The Conversation. And we still have with us Pastor Osagie Ize-Iyamu. Hopefully, before this program ends, Governor Obaseki will join us. We hope so. But Pastor Osagie Ize-Iyamu, thank you very much for staying with us. Let's talk about security votes, which is something that generates a lot of controversy among Nigerians. In 2018, Transparency International published a report indicating that 29 states spent an average of $580 million, about 208.8 billion naira yearly on security votes. Now, are you of the opinion that this should be scrapped?
Well, thank you. I think that The reason why people are talking about scrapping it is the way many governors have misused that vote. But I want you to also understand that there are a lot of governors who have used that vote very prudently, very wisely, to intervene in critical areas that has brought stability to their states in terms of security. So for me, it's not a question of scrapping it, but how do you use it? Edo State, before this present governor came in, the security vote was around 4.5 billion annually. He came in and increased it to 7.5 billion, which is almost like a 100% increase. But unfortunately, how is he spending it? The little statistics I got is frightening. You know, before, the Edo State Police Command was getting like 5 million monthly pittance to complement what they are doing in Edo State. Not the local government. The state government was giving a 5 billion naira. And then you would expect that a governor who has increased security vote by almost 100% will review that pittance and give them something reasonable to make them function better. But in the past 4 years, there's been no change. It has remained the same. Edo Security Trust Fund, which I support, and which is something that must complement government investment in the security sector. What has happened to it? Nobody's interested because they do not see any seriousness on the part of government. Before, when I was in government and others were in government, it was regular to purchase vehicles, brand new vehicles, Hiluxes, to support the police so that movement can be easy, especially when you're talking about very bad terrains and rural areas. What we found in this administration was a joke. Some vehicles from China, vehicles that cannot plow our roads, and vehicles that have all, collapsed, and today are parked in different parts of the city. The few functional ones are only at the residence of the governor, the deputy, and the SSG. Government must invest in security. And if you are using your security vote for that, complementing traditional rulers and institutions, communities, to ensure that the vigilantes, the community police, are all functioning, I don't think anybody will query your security vote. But when nothing is happening, the level of insecurity is an all-time high. Every day, we are confronted with people being kidnapped. And in known locations, it's not as if the locations are different. A lot of times, the locations are exactly the same. If I were a governor, with that kind of intelligence information, I will come to the area. I will mobilize the military, mobilize the police, and say, please help me enter the bush, help me enter the forest, and arrest all suspicious people inside that place. But it has never been done. It has never been done. So that is why people are complaining. You can't be collecting over 600 million monthly. And what we have been able to calculate, you spend 5 million to police, 3 million to state security service, 1 million to civil defense. Maximum you are spending 10. Let's even consider you spend 20 million. How can you spend 20 million on security? And you collect 600 million. What are you doing with the balance? And this money is collected religiously. Even during COVID, when the governor had to slash the budget and do a budget review, the security vote was not touched, sacrosanct. Security vote has immunity in Edo State. It has immunity. It cannot be touched. But the money for the judiciary was cut down by almost 50%. The money to the House of Assembly was cut down. But the security vote remained the way it is. And the issue is, what are you doing with it? If we're seeing brand new vehicles, communication equipments, trackers, drones, policemen motivated, they will say, oh, the government is doing a fantastic job. Forget about how much they are spending. I've told people, security is not cheap. So if you spend money, fine. But what are you doing? All the community efforts that we found in vigilante groups, they have all ceased. Not too long ago, I was impressed when I found out that the Catholic bishop in Auchi invited all the hunters and the vigilante to a meeting where he provided refreshment for them. encourage them, thank them. A bishop, realizing the importance of communal effort, called all these people to encourage them. It has not been done by government. But this time, we intend to bring them in. We are going to run a very serious security outfit. And we're going to fund them. And if we have to exhaust the security vote to be able to fund them, all is well. Good, no, there's no problem with it. Because security will bring investment to our states. Security will bring visitors to our states. And so for me, no amount is too much to spend. But the problem is that you are collecting money and you're not spending it. You know, you're not giving any answers. So what is really the problem is the secrecy and the abuse of security vote. If it's spent for what it is meant for, I think people will applaud its use. And that is why, under our leadership, by example, we talk about transparency, accountability. You must be accountable. With every fund you take out from government, there should be transparency. Don't use government funds as if they are personal funds. They are state funds. And no matter the head they put them in, you must still account on how it was spent. So let me assure you that we will not scrap security vote because we have security challenges. But we will ensure that we increase the funding to security agencies. We will ensure that we bring in our vigilante groups and begin to give them stipends. We will ensure that we buy equipments and technology that would make crime prevention easier in our state. By the time we do so, and our people regularly are fed back with the cost of doing these things, I'm sure that nobody will complain about how we spend security vote.
Pastor Osagie Ize-Iyamu, should you become governor, I'm very sure that the Edo people and the fourth estate of the realm will hold you to your words of being transparent with the security votes. It will be one new thing Nigerians will look forward to because there's so much secrecy, like you said, when it comes to security votes. But still talking about security in Edo State, you mentioned the Edo State Security Trust Fund, and you said you are in support of it. Since the launch of that trust fund in 2018, we do know that at least 4 billion naira from the government and 200 million naira from the chairman of the trust fund, Osagie Ize-Iyamu, has gone into it. As governor, would you maintain this model? And what would be done differently to raise funds for that security trust fund, the security sector in general?
Well, number one, I have my doubts that government actually injected 4 billion into that fund. Because if they did, we would see the benefits. We will see the result. The chairman, Ize-Iyamu, is a very reputable, illustrious Edo indigene. And if he gives 200 million, we salute him, we appreciate him. He's a man who cares for our state. But I'm sure if you ask him, he will tell you that nothing is happening there. I'm sure he's probably become even frustrated, just like the former Inspector General of Police, Solomon Arase, became frustrated when the Oba appealed to him to support the government in trying to build security architecture for our state. He had to resign. For him to have accepted that job was very patriotic of him. But for him to have resigned tells a story of government indifference and government nonchalance to security matters. So for me, I believe that we must have a security trust fund. In my simple agenda, I mentioned it. Because government alone cannot fund security. Everybody benefits. If the banks would now enjoy better security, why would they not support us? I went to Onwa West, where there are a lot of farmers there. So there's a lot of cash at their disposal. And their appeal to me was, Pastor, please, help us encourage a bank to come here. For the past 10 years, we've not had a bank. What happened? The only bank we had, First Bank, was raided by armed robbers. Some people were killed. And First Bank had to close the place. And since that time, we've not had any bank. Is that not shocking? That a local government with a lot of resources will not have a bank. And government will not facilitate the reopening of the bank that was existing. How do you improve your economy? How do you get people to invest in your state? If the bank became worried and alarmed about the casualties they were suffering, it's your duty to take steps to reassure them. And by the time they see these steps, they will come back. Because basically, they want to do business, but not at the cost of their customers or their own staff, not at the cost of their lives. So you have to reassure them. And for you to just say that's police business is wrong, because you are the chief security officer of your state. So your job is to ensure that in all these kind of places, you create a security atmosphere that will benefit them. But unfortunately, that's the situation. I went to Iruekme in Esan West. Their request was, please, we now have a divisional police headquarters, but no office for the DPO. Is that something we should wait for the police to try and do? Or wait for the community to tax themselves to do? Because what that is simply achieving for us is that it's bringing security closer to the doorsteps of our people, ensuring that we have adequate police coverage. For me, that is something that either the state government does immediately, or you give marching orders to the local government to build quickly. The local governments today are just there. In my time, they were doing roads. They were doing major projects. And in fact, we had awards for performing council chairmen. Today, how do you rate them? There's none of them that can even get a 10% pass mark, because they are doing nothing. You don't hear about roads being done. The whole place is in a mess. So we need a governor that is focused, a governor that knows the priority of our people, and a governor that will follow through on everything he says.
Well, Pastor Ize-Iyamu, let's take another quick break, and then when we return, the conversation will still continue. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. We still continue with this special edition of the show today, Edo Governorship Election 2020, the conversation. And still with us in Benin City is the gubernatorial candidate of the All Progressives Congress, Pastor Osagie Ize-Iyamu. I keep announcing that we're still expecting Godwin Obaseki, the governor of Edo State, the incumbent governor, but we'll see what happens. Maybe at the end of the day, Governor Obaseki has chosen to participate in this conversation through paid advertisement. But thank you, Pastor Osagie Ize-Iyamu, for staying with us. Let's move on to the second segment of our conversation. We'll start with education. Now, Edo State used to have a history of churning out some of the best students at the primary, secondary, and tertiary levels, but we have seen a decline over the years. How do you intend to improve education standards at all levels in Edo State?
Thank you. By simply making education a priority in our budget consideration. Primary schools, for example, do not have teachers. You can't talk about Edo Best in primary schools when in most of the schools you go to, there are no teachers. It's like talking about cars without drivers. So we need teachers, and we have to employ them. And unfortunately, the number who have resigned, who have retired, is quite huge. So to be able to bring our schools up to date, we must, at the first instance, employ nothing less than 3,000-4,000 teachers. But we have to do it, irrespective of the cost. Because our children, our families and Edo people place so much premium on education. And the primary is the foundation. So we need to spend so much, we need to invest. Then number two, we need to improve our schools and make them attractive. Yes, we have said free education from primary to junior secondary school. But it's important that we make these schools accessible to our people. Our state is growing. Communities are springing up. So government must locate new areas for schools. Most of the huge traffic you see in our cities today is because in new settlements, there are no facilities, no schools, no hospitals, no markets. So everybody goes back to the traditional places. That is not how you plan a city. That's not how you plan a state. So we need to establish more schools. We need to renovate them and make them as attractive as possible to parents and to pupils. And we need to equip them. There are so many schools, you will not even see public toilets, you will never see toilets. The children are forced to go anywhere to go and ease themselves. That is not good enough. And then, of course, we need to also invest in technology. We need to invest in technology. So whether there's COVID or not, our children must be educated, even if they are at home. All these things we must put right. And then the curriculum. Right now, they are talking about the do best. They said they train teachers, but at very, very astronomical cost, because each teacher, for a 4-week training, government paid 1.5 million. If you times that with the number that the governor claims he has trained, around 11,000, he was that's over 16 billion of Edo money. And this training, what has it translated to? You mentioned in the past, we did very well in the examinations. That is how you know a state that is doing well educationally. Their performance in national examinations. I would have been happy if Edo Best arose from the fact that in the past 4 years, we are now dominating in examinations. But that is not the truth. We're just talking the fact that, oh, we have invested in TAPs. And these TAPs are not even new. Because when you look at the TAPs, you read Bridge College from Lagos. That means they were collected from there. So what are we talking about? We have to invest seriously in education. Secondary school, there's no investment. We need boarding facilities. We need science laboratories. We also need qualified teachers and well-trained teachers. Unfortunately, the colleges and institutions that were training teachers have been closed down. So even in terms of getting the manpower to train our children, we have closed the institutions. Ditto for the State School of Nursing and Midwifery that would have produced nurses and midwives for health institutions, primary, secondary, and even tertiary. It's been closed. So secondary too, we have missed it. But the most dangerous is a deliberate attempt to close down tertiary institutions. And let me begin to name them. College of Agriculture, Igworiari. We reopened that place when I was in government because we realized then that the future for our nation and for our state was agriculture. So we needed to begin to train people to take a serious interest in agriculture so that when they graduate, apart from becoming consultants or local farmers, they too, with the assistance of government, can begin to set up farm settlements. This government came in and they closed it. College of Education in the Kadolo was upgraded to university. Whether you believe it or not, the thirst and hunger of our people for university education is high. And the requirements to actually get approval for university is also very stringent. So it's actually kudos that we were able to move our College of Education to university status. All that was necessary was to build on it. But the place is closed. The College of Physical Education in Afuze, Onwa East, is closed. The College of Agriculture in Agenebode is closed. College of Education in Igwebe is closed. I can name it on and on and on. Then the few remaining ones. Ali Professor Ali University, the premier university of the state at Ekpoba. The subvention, monthly subvention, has been reduced from 270 million to 96 million. You can imagine the percentage of reduction. Oshomole was paying 250 million to complement salaries and 20 million to support pensions, total 270 million. Even then, that university was still one of the least funded state universities. Then the governor comes in and reduces the money to 96 million. The consequence is that 2 months ago, they had to go to the bank to borrow money. The bank obliged them, thinking that money will come. So when the next month again, they came again asking for a loan, the bank refused. So last month, they could not pay salaries. And what they are now contemplating, and which the government is actually encouraging them to do, is a very high rise in school fees from 50-something thousand to 300,000. The consequence, again, will be that many parents in Edo will be forced to withdraw their children from that school because they cannot pay it. Where are they going to get that kind of money when government does not patronize them? They pay taxes and yet they don't get anything in return. And the schools that government should provide as a matter of right to them, you are now making it unaffordable. So the plan is after the elections, let's increase school fees. So that place is in a very dire situation right now. Then the one that was established at Iyamu, Esako West. And funny enough, when that university was being contemplated, Governor Obaseki was appointed the secretary of the implementation committee for that university. So you would have thought that he would have a personal interest in the development of that place. But guess what? The 100 million subvention that government was giving to them monthly as a young university to pay salaries and deal with their overheads, the governor scrapped it. So a young university is told to survive on zero subvention. The consequence will be that university would have to close down or charge fees that can only be paid by the children of the very rich, which negates the purpose of a state government using taxpayers' money to build universities. So you see the picture from primary, secondary to university, very bleak. And then teachers, as I said before, they are not there. The required training and motivation is not there. There are technical schools. The technical college that they are trying to build at Tukbowo in Igor local government has been going on for 4 years. How can it take 4 years to rebuild a technical college? When what would have been hearing is that in every senatorial district, you have built one. You know, I'm amazed that the governor is not using the opportunity of his re-election bid to showcase his achievements. It's not just mere words. Begin to tell us the things you have done. I built 3 technical colleges. I built 4 hospitals. I did 10 roads. Look at the road that they are attempting to do on Ekenwa Road. Ekenwa Road was a good road before, leading to the Ekenwa campus of the University of Benin. A very important road. That's the road that leads to Gelegele, a major oil producing community in Edo State. That road today is in a mess because government, Edo State government, attempted to do what the president was doing. Do a dual carriage road. But it's a disaster. So in 4 years, one major road cannot be constructed. All you are relying on are C4 projects that were even conceived in 2011. And many of these roads, these C4 projects, are low-cost roads. Low cost. They're actually roads for feeder roads, rural roads. Roads that do not even enjoy too much traffic because the kind of money spent there, cannot make it durable. And these are the roads you want to pretend to showcase that you are doing so well. So education is in a deplorable state. We are going to invest in technical education. We are going to invest in our tertiary institutions. We are going to build our secondary schools, science laboratories, boarding facilities, sport facilities. We are going to go back to the era when you discover talent, sports talent, at school sports. We're going to bring that era back. And we're going to create scholarship for children of the poor who show brilliance, especially in science subjects. We're actually also looking at doing a bursary award because I'm a beneficiary of bursary award. In 1980, I got bursary in the University of Benin as a student when Professor Ambrose Ali was governor, implementing the free education policy of the UPN. So if I could enjoy that kind of facility, I'm also thinking that, can I be governor and I will not give opportunity, give a state of ownership to Edo youths? Because you can imagine how you feel to say you are getting this money because you are an Edo indigene. It creates so much pride and patriotism that in future you want to pay back to your state. The only reason why we are being careful is that we need to look at the numbers and how much are we talking about. But it's something worth contemplating and even worth doing.
All right, thank you so much, Pastor.
So let me assure you that in terms of education, thank you.
Thank you very much. And speaking about the governor, we're still expecting him to join the conversation to at least showcase and give his own side of the story, giving an account of his stewardship in the last 4 years. But back to you, Pastor Osagie Ize-Iyamu, and I'd still like to dwell a bit on education. There seems to be a lot of emphasis on teachers, and it is no longer news that Nigerians are losing their jobs daily, especially with COVID-19 realities. But the private school teachers, most of them, if not all of them, have been adversely affected by this because they say they do not have income as the schools are shut down, and they do not have interventions like those under the employ of the government. What would be your intervention plan to address this issue, private school teachers in Edo State?
Well, it was when we were in government. In fact, I don't think it was not even when I was in government, but I remember when I was a leader in the APC, and private school proprietors complained about the hostile environment that they were operating. Apart from not getting government support in their schools, the levies and taxes they were being made to pay were so high that many of them had to close their schools. And because I was fortunate to be at that meeting, I spoke very strongly to comrades to listen to them and review the levies that was being imposed on them. And I must confess that Oshomole did. And that helped many schools to get back on their feet. What you have mentioned now is a serious problem. It's not affecting only teachers, but affecting a lot of people, especially in the private sector. In solid economies, you begin to look for how you can bail out some of these companies and institutions, because if they close, the school suffers. You know, but because of the precarious nature of our own system, it's difficult for government to do the needful in terms of supporting private institutions at a time like this. I think that what we need to do is to have a conversation with private school owners. The fact that children cannot come to the classroom does not mean that they cannot be taught. We run schools. The Redeemed Christian Church of God, where I'm a pastor, and I'm in charge of our Christian social responsibility, which some call corporate social responsibility. We try to build schools in our areas of worship. We try to build hospitals, and we have quite a number of schools in Edo State. When COVID started, we closed, like many schools. But when we realized that it was not going to be something that would change after 3-4 weeks, and that nobody knew when this whole thing would end, we realized that keeping our children permanently at home would jeopardize their future. And so we had to consult with experts and introduce e-learning, so that even while they're at home, their teachers are able to teach them, and set exams for them. And it's been quite successful. And so, in spite of COVID, we are paying our teachers. We are not saying that, because of COVID, we are not paying our teachers. And those are private schools, but owned by the church. We are paying. So we need to have a conversation with private school owners to know how to cope with this kind of situation. And honestly, under our own public-private partnership, we're also going to partner with private institutions and schools and hospitals. Any way we can support them, we'll support them. A lot of times, donor agencies, they bring books and teaching equipments that we just share only to public schools. That to me is wrong.
Well,
Even children in private schools should benefit.
Pastor Ize-Iyamu, I get your point about partnership, which definitely is very important. But let's take another short break at this point. When we return, we'll focus on health and also some political issues. Please stay with us. It's still The Morning Show. We'll be right back. Welcome back to The Morning Show here on the Arise News Channel. We're still continuing with the Edo State Gubernatorial Election 2020, The Conversation. And still with us all the way from Benin is the candidate of the All Progressives Congress, Pastor Osagie Ize-Iyamu. Pastor Osagie Ize-Iyamu, let's talk about the health sector. What do you plan to do to improve health care in Edo State, particularly in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic, which everyone admits has exposed the fragility of healthcare infrastructure, not only in Nigeria, but globally, particularly in low and medium developing countries?
Well, thank you very much. When I wrote my simple agenda many years ago, I did not even contemplate a pandemic like the COVID-19. But I had advocated that we need a disease control center in Edo State to be built, equipped, and manned with professionals who will tackle problems that might erupt from time to time medically. And I'm happy that that idea makes a lot of sense now. We have to give priority to health, education, security, and infrastructure. These are areas that we cannot toy with. Under normal circumstances, the local governments are the ones charged with the responsibility of providing healthcare centers at the ward levels. But I concede that if the local governments are no longer doing their duty, the state cannot just fold their hands. But the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria gives states the prerogative to supervise the local governments. So it's also not enough to say that the local governments are not doing anything. Because in one debate I had with the governor, he made it clear that his own priority was primary healthcare centers and not hospitals. And I had to make him know that hospitals, specialist hospitals, are secondary healthcare institutions that are the responsibility of state governments. And that is where serious ailments and problems are addressed, not at the primary healthcare centers that should just be a reference point for minor problems. But the governor's promise of doing or providing primary health care centers in the 192 wards has failed. Because he promised that the primary health care centers in the world was going to renovate them, rebuild them, re-equip them, and put personnel. 192 wards. But to be fair to him, out of the 192, he did 22. But 22 out of 192 is around 11%. And that is failed. So I'm not surprised when Chief Danobi, the former chairman of PDP, the party he now belongs, scored him F9 in the health sector. You know, because that is your promise. You didn't make any serious promise about secondary health institutions. And of course, those ones have been neglected. But starting with primary health care centers, we need to make them more functional. A lot have been built in the past. They need to be renovated. They need to be equipped, and drugs made available in them. And then we need to attract medical personnel. Those days, we get youth corpers, and we deploy them and make them comfortable. And of course, they all must have nurses. But again, like I said, when you close the State School of Nursing and Midwifery, you're actually closing your access to nurses and midwives. But we have to do something about primary health care centers. Then, the secondary ones. We have 34 government hospitals. Many of them are in very, very deplorable condition. The one that is supposed to be the flagship, which was the Central Hospital. But I'm happy that we built the Stella Obasanjo Hospital. We built it when I was secretary to government, and I personally chairmaned the construction of that hospital. And I'm happy that when the governor went there for the first time, after spending over 3.5 years in office, he went there during COVID. He was amazed at the structure and the facilities that were there. But going back to the Central Hospital, which was built in 1903, Oshomole decided to rebuild a part of it, and the plan was that over time, the whole hospital would be rebuilt. But of course, with limited resources, let him start from somewhere. And he built what he called a 5-star hospital, and he left the other part to be built later. Unfortunately, this government came in, and there became a huge controversy over that hospital to the extent it was shut for close to 2 years. Now, when it was finally reopened, it was given to a consultant who is not a doctor, who is not an indigent to run. And what he's charging, even just to get admission card, is so prohibitive that that hospital cannot be accessed by those people. So they are forced to go to the old central one, because that one still charges 500 naira for admission card. But the sad thing is that, apart from when the governor went there 4 years ago, the old complex, to go and campaign, he has never entered the hospital since his inception as governor. And I find that shocking. That the hospital so close to government house, a hospital that majority of your people in the state capital go to, the governor has never visited there just to see the state and see what can be done. And no wonder the place lacks basic facilities. Like I mentioned earlier, you don't even have a place there to do X-ray. The old place that was meant for X-ray was destroyed to make way for the new building. So this one has no X-ray and lacks so many facilities, no dental clinic. All these ones have been destroyed. So in terms of the hospitals, terrible. I went to Oromia and they told me, sir, we have only one doctor. And many of them do not even have doctors. So we need to get medical personnel. We need to renovate those hospitals. We need to equip them. We need to have drugs. And again, this is where public-private partnership comes in. There are so many companies, including General Electrical, who we can work out a deal with that will bring us equipments and we pay them over time. They have these equipments. They are looking for hospitals to use them. So all we need to do is to tell them, please bring these equipments, train our people on how to use them. And as we get money from usage, we remit. And over time, we pay you back. But we cannot even avail ourselves of this simple, convenient arrangements. So our hospitals lack facilities. They lack personnel. And the doctors and medical people are not motivated. You know, they are not motivated. So we need to do something about our hospitals because the health of our people is very important. In many of the rural areas, they have no access. So we also need to have an ambulance system whereby anyone who is ill can be picked up at the shortest possible time and brought either to a primary health care center or to the hospital. The government have GIS, but unfortunately, they have just restricted it to land use charges and demarcation, not knowing that it's something that can also be used for ambulances, for security, and so many other areas. We will deploy it so that when ambulances are on the move, we can even track their movement. We know where they are, we know when they are coming back. So the usual sharp practice of diverting, you can't try it because we are monitoring you. And we have the facility here. So we need to have ambulances, not even just vehicles alone, but even in the river area. We should provide boats that will serve as riverine ambulances to be able to also, support our people in the river area. I went to Gele and what I saw was sad. And that is why they complain about neglect. Because basically, there's no facility. I went to Sobe and they showed me the vehicle that government provided as ambulance for their primary healthcare center. It was a keke napep, a tricycle. How can a tricycle carry somebody who is seriously sick to the hospital? The person will die. How many of us will allow our parents or our loved ones to be put on the keke napep, a tricycle, when the person is seriously sick? That's wickedness.
Okay.
So I think that the health sector, government has not done well at all.
All right, point
It has not
noted.
done well.
Pastor,
The governor has confessed that, well, in the health sector, he has really not done too well. But the health sector is critical.
indeed.
It's critical. It's not something that you can overlook.
Pastor,
And you cannot privatize the health sector. You can support private hospitals, but you cannot privatize it because your people, their lives depend on accessible, affordable healthcare facilities. You have a duty to ensure that your people, whether rich or poor, can access and afford health facilities. But this is lacking. And today,
all right, Pastor
all you
Osagie
see
Ize-Iyamu, if
are
you can
private
hear
hospitals, Faith Medical Complex, Lily Hospital,
Can you hear me, Pastor
Philomena
Osagie
Hospital.
Ize-Iyamu?
Where are the government hospitals? Thank God for UBTH, Federal. Thank God for IRWA, Federal. Don't we have a state government? Is health care not one of their priorities? If you look at our rate in HIV, very high. If you look at our rate in infant and maternal mortality.
Well, there seems to be a communication problem there. We'll take a break and fix that. I'll be right back with the conversation. Welcome back to the special edition of the Morning Show here on the Rise News Channel. Tag the conversation with the major contestants in this weekend's Edo State gubernatorial election. And we have Pastor Osagie Ize-Iyamu, the candidate of the All Progressives Congress, the opposition party in the state, with us. Still expecting the incumbent and the candidate of the People's Democratic Party, Governor Godwin Obaseki, to join us. We are yet to see him. Thank you so much, Pastor, for staying with us. Now, we have seen those campaign rallies in an era of COVID-19, and they are not COVID-19 protocol compliant. At the moment, according to statistics by the NCDC, Edo State has one of the highest record of COVID-19 numbers in Nigeria. In fact, it's the fifth highest state in Nigeria. It currently has 2,610 cases and 100 deaths. What measures will you put in place to prevent further spread of the virus, and how will they be achieved?
Thank you very much. Well, it's unfortunate that we are facing this problem at a time like this. I also believe, too, that the government of Edo mismanaged the pandemic in our state in terms of control, prevention, and even support to our people, because they are to practically be giving palliatives people from all over the states when I realized that government was not even interested in doing so. In our rallies, we tried at the beginning to make them quite low-key. We thought that we should focus more on media coverage, communicate our message through television, radio, newspapers, and the social media. And that is why we deliberately decided not to advertise our rallies. But our people, in spite of not telling them, kept coming out in large numbers. In fact, people have been asking me, Pastor, when are you going to do your final campaign, final rally? And I said, no. I don't want to endanger the lives of our people more. When we did the flag off, I was happy to see the thousands of people that trooped out at the University of Benin Sports Complex. I was happy. But when I also realized that most of them did not even bother to put on face masks, despite the fact that we had so many free face masks we were distributing, but they did not even bother. When you give it to them, they just put it in their pocket and smile. I was reluctant to subject them again to another massive rally where we have very close personal contact, which could aggravate an already bad situation. So we have tried our best, but we are not in government. It's the job of government to educate our people on the seriousness of this matter. We have done our part as private citizens, but you know that the government paid lip service to the seriousness of COVID. When it first erupted, and we advised that we need to shut up our state, so that too many people do not come in. As at that time, there was no recorded case. And so we felt that, well, maybe we should shut down and watch the situation. The governor refused. And the excuse was that he could not afford to, disrupt the economy of the state. And my question was, which economy? If Lagos, that is the economic nerve center of our country, if Abuja, that is also the political nerve center, can close down, what are we talking about? What arrogance, that we're using to jeopardize the lives of our people by saying that we cannot shut down? And we did shut down until the cases erupted. And even when they erupted, we found ourselves totally unprepared, even though we saw it coming. As of today, how many test centers do we really have? If not for the federal teaching hospital at Irua and the UBTH, which is also federal, our people would have been completely helpless in the face of this pandemic. So government did not do the needful. And that's why people, almost rioted when the governor tried to claim just a month after the pandemic that they had spent over 1 billion. People said, what? Where? What have you done? What have you done? Until they had to look for a way to, retract that statement. But quite honestly, we need to take our people more seriously. We need to sensitize them about some of these things. We need to make them realize that they must protect themselves. We did it for a while and then we stopped. But as it is stopped, no.
Wow.
So even if others stop, government must continue to stress that this thing is real. Yes. So government has stopped. Nobody's talking about pandemic anymore. And the same government that frowned against large gatherings, continue to flat that rule. Because of COVID-19, we decided to do our primaries in various units because we said, let us decentralize the process. If we do indirect primaries, the number will be congregating in one place will be too much.
Well,
so let's decentralize the process. And we did it.
I'm sure many persons will agree with you on that score. But let's take another quick break. And then when we return, we'll begin to wrap up the conversation. We'll be right back. Please stay with us. Just a couple more, 2 more questions or thereabouts, and then we'll be done. But we'll be right back. Let's take this break. Welcome back to the morning show here on the Arise News channel. You're still watching the Edo State Governorship Election 2020, The Conversation. We've been talking to Pastor Ize-Iyamu, the candidate of the All Progressives Congress. We're still expecting Governor Obaseki, who is supposed to be part of this conversation, but it doesn't look like that will happen. But Governor Obaseki has been stoutly and ably represented by paid advertisement. But Pastor Ize-Iyamu, thank you for staying with us. 2 quick questions because we're on the home stretch now in this conversation. Now, Pastor Ize-Iyamu, the issue of godfatherism has played a major role in the campaigns leading up to the elections. What assurance can you give that the people of Edo will not have persons outside government who are not even from Edo State exerting undue influence in your government if you become governor of the state? And I would like to add to that what happened recently when the national leader of the party, had a paid advertisement supporting your candidature and attacking Governor Obaseki. There are persons who have said Edo is not Lagos. Don't you think this will affect your chances in a way because it looks like interference from outside?
Thank you. Edo people know me. They know my pedigree. They know my history. And I've always fought on the side of the people. I'm not afraid to call a spade a spade. And as far back as 2005, I set up a group in Edo State called the Grace Group. That Grace Group is actually the foundation of what you call the APC today. And our slogan then was, "No man is God." We detested godfatherism in politics. We condemned it. We fought against it. And when Oshomole became the governor of the ACA, he took that slogan to a new level and declared in government that no to godfatherism. So we have had a history.
We had a very robust conversation around the issues of interest to the people of Edo State. And we would like to thank Pastor Ize-Iyamu, candidate of the All Progressives Congress, for joining us, and also Governor Godwin Obaseki, who couldn't make it to the program, but who was ably represented by paid advertisement. Well, thank you very much also for watching The Morning Show.